In this video, I will show you how to tattoo this design using different techniques. Using shaving foam allows the skin to be shaved more gently. This helps prevent small skin injuries, which could be especially problematic when working on very fine details. I clean the area with a skin disinfectant. I repeat this process 2 to 3 times. After that, I apply a thin layer of stencil stuff. Press it on, and we're ready to go. We weren't happy with the placement, so we do it again. For this tattoo, I'm using the Fold Pro by Dragonhawk. You can find all the products in the video description, and with the code fanitattoo, you get 10% off your order. I'm using Ganga Black, and for the grayscale, I use Greywash 80. I fill one color cap with pure black. The others are filled with gray wash, slightly less in each one, and only a single drop in the last cap. The rest is topped up with shading solution. I start by using a 3-round liner at 8 volts. For beginners, I would recommend starting with a lower voltage. The stroke is 4.2 millimeters, and that's roughly how far the needle is protruding from the cartridge. For the skin to take the ink properly, it needs to be stretched well. You can see that clearly in this camera angle. To give you an even better view of how this works, I'm now switching to the macro lens with double magnification. For these lines, I'm working with dark gray. At the top of the image, I've added all the relevant information. It took a lot of work, but it's absolutely worth it. I'll explain later why I'm not using pure black right away. Everything I do here follows a system, which I'll explain in this video so you can apply it to any other design. As always, I've linked the design and the stencil as a download in the video description. The back of the hand is a very difficult area. The skin varies a lot, and the tissue underneath is very thin, which means there's very little tolerance for blowouts. Just to show you once again how small these lines really are, I'm switching back to the other camera angle. Tattooing such a detailed design on such a challenging body part requires a lot of experience. That said, you can still practice this at home on fake skin. It's definitely challenging, but I'm sure you'll learn a lot from it. To create smooth fades, I always lift out of the skin very softly. To keep my hand steadier, I like to support myself with my free thumb. The smaller the distance between my hand and the client's skin, the easier it is to pull a precise line. For the slightly thicker lines, I use a 7-round liner. The machine settings remain the same, as you can see in the graphic in the top left. Because this needle is thicker, I need to move a bit slower. As I move toward the palm of the hand, the skin becomes thicker, and I have to slow down even more. When the skin is very thick, I can create the line using small back and forth movements, almost as if I'm filling the line. As soon as the skin becomes thinner again, I can pull the lines normally in a single pass. It's really incredible how much the skin can vary on the back of the hand. Once you understand how to work with different skin types, it's no longer a problem at all. In the past, I often struggled with different skin types. simply because there are so many variations. By now, I know how to handle them, and that's exactly what I'm trying to explain to you in a way that will save you a lot of time. Tattooing is a very complex subject that can't be fully explained in just one video. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of patience to learn. There will definitely be many more videos coming, and if you don't want to miss any of them, I'd really appreciate a free subscription and a like. To give the dark gray lines from the beginning a nice transition, I now blend into them using pure black. I start in the thicker line and pull back about half of the previous line. Here as well, I have to make sure to lift out of the skin softly so the transition doesn't look too harsh. I can do the same thing on the smaller lines. The difference between dark gray and black is even more visible once the tattoo is healed, so it's absolutely worth doing. I've purchased many online tattoo courses, and I've never seen close-up shots this detailed before. I think I also know why. From farther away, everything simply looks better. Just as a reminder, this is how it would look to the human eye. I don't mind if small imperfections are visible, because I know that no tattoo is perfect when viewed up close. For you, however, this is probably a huge help, because it allows you to clearly see how the needle interacts with the skin and how deep you're actually allowed to go. For me personally, it's also very important to educate clients that fine line tattoos won't stay this detailed forever. Tattoos age with the skin, and over the years, the ink spreads slightly under the skin, causing the tattoo to become a bit lighter. Even so, I believe fine line tattoos absolutely have their place because they simply look good. And most people aren't bothered by the fact that some details fade over time. Here, I'm working with dark gray again. From my experience, lines done with a 3-round liner become noticeably thicker over the years when tattooed with pure black compared to using dark gray. That's why I prefer to be a bit more cautious here. In the center of the back of the hand, the skin is extremely thin, which makes placing the ink into the dermis very difficult. Before you go too deep with a line, it's better to go over it twice, because a blowout cannot be undone. If you're a tattoo beginner, I would also recommend avoiding difficult body areas in general at first so you can develop a proper feel for it. After finishing the lines in the bird's back, I switch back to a 7-round liner and use pure black again for the outlines. Tattooing the back of the hand is quite similar to tattooing a shin because in both areas there is very little tissue under the skin. I'd rather carefully go over the same line once more than risk going too deep. In this camera angle, I want to briefly show you how I position my hand. When I guide the needle parallel to the line automatically has the same thickness everywhere. It also makes it easier to stay straight, because the entry point of a parallel line is more like a small stroke, since the tattoo machine is always moved at a slight angle. That's a bit hard to explain, but I think you know what I mean. I already tattooed these thin lines in dark gray earlier. Now I'm doing the same thing as on the wing. I pull back about half of the line, using pure black and the 3-round liner to create a smooth transition from dark to light. It's difficult to describe what tattooing feels like, but with such thin skin and such a fine needle, it almost feels like you're pulling the line in the air because there's hardly any resistance. It's completely sufficient if the needle only lightly touches the skin. If you practice this at home on fake skin, if you scale the design up, you should also adjust your needle choice accordingly. It's very possible that such a fine needle won't be necessary anymore. One thing I see very often with tattoo beginners is that they change their hand speed while tattooing. If you start a line slowly and then gradually get faster, the line won't be evenly saturated. Don't let the color on the skin distract you, and focus only on your depth and your hand speed. If those stay consistent, you already have a very solid foundation to build on. When you look at my stencil now, it looks like it was just applied even though I've already tattooed many lines. That's because I always complete the tattoo in an order that allows me to wipe over the stencil as little as possible. If the stencil stays perfectly intact, there is no reason to stress yourself. This allows me to work calmly and precisely on every line, and in the end, it becomes a tattoo that my client will hopefully be happy with for a very long time. Since I started YouTube, my tattoo skills have actually improved significantly because I constantly have to question myself and explain why I do things the way I do. At this point, a big thank you to everyone who participates in the comments. I'm very grateful for such a respectful community. Many of your questions have already inspired new, cool video ideas and have even helped me improve in certain areas. I believe it's extremely important to always stay open to criticism. I'm sure you'll never meet a tattoo artist who tells you that they are fully trained and know everything. You learn the most through practice. Of course, watching tutorials is important, but in general, you can say, the more you practice, the faster you improve. Here, I'm pulling the lines relatively quickly. If this speed feels too fast for you, you can simply lower your voltage. A line this thin should never look really dark when it's freshly tattooed. If it does, there's a very high chance you're working too deep. A 3-round liner is extremely fine, and that's exactly how the line should look. You often see fine line tattoos online that develop thick, blown out lines after a few months. In my opinion, the main reason for this is that many people tattoo too deep. A lot of artists try to achieve solid line work with a needle that's simply too thin, but that's the wrong tool for the job. Just use a thicker needle and you can create solid lines. It really is that simple. For the outer contour, I switch back to a thicker needle. I enter the skin softly so I can continue the line later without creating a visible transition. Here I'm a bit more cautious because the stencil isn't 100% perfect. I can easily tattoo over the same line again, but I have to be much more careful, and you shouldn't overdo it. It's always best to get a line perfect in one pass, even though that's not always possible. Going over it twice is completely fine, but the third time starts to become risky. So, what happens if you go over a line too many times? The top layer of the skin gets damaged too much, and the skin can no longer hold the ink properly. This causes the line to lose more pigment than usual. Most of the time, I can already feel during tattooing whether a line will hold or not. Sometimes I'll go over it a second time right away. That's not a problem, as long as you don't overdo it. Remember this. If a line doesn't look solid when it's freshly tattooed, it will look even worse once it's healed. The same applies to color packing. If an area already looks patchy when it's fresh, it will look even patchier once healed. Here, a bit too much ink came out. If I extend the needle slightly further out of the cartridge, it should work better. Now it looks good. Here's the full view again, the way the human eye would actually see it. From this perspective, you can also see how little depth is really needed. In fact, once the skin is slightly opened, it accepts the ink much more easily on the second pass. I can play very subtly with depth to create a natural transition. For example, I pointed out to my client beforehand that lines placed very close together will slowly blur into a darker area over the years. If a tattoo still looks good after 3 years, that's great. But a tattoo is something you carry for a lifetime. And compared to that, 3 years isn't very long. Almost all fine line tattoos lose some of their impact over a longer period of time. They don't look bad over time, they simply lose some detail. That's exactly why it's so important for a design to include enough negative space. It allows the tattoo to age much more gracefully. For work this detailed, I always recommend using good lighting. It can make a huge difference in how precisely you're able to tattoo. I even worked with a headlamp for years. It doesn't look very elegant, but that's not what tattooing is about. When doing such detailed work, make sure to give your clients very clear aftercare instructions. If the tattoo isn't cared for properly during the healing process, fine details can be lost within just a few weeks. The worst factors are sun exposure and dry skin because they cause the skin to renew itself faster, and with that, it also loses pigment more quickly. And even though I explained all of this, my client still sent me a photo from the gym the very next day after I asked for a picture. That's unbelievable. But yes, these are factors you simply can't control, and sometimes you just have to accept that. For the shading, I use 5 volts. All other machine settings remain the same. Because of the fast hand movement, the needle is only in the skin for a very short time. For that reason, I use pure black, so the dots are clearly visible. My goal is to keep the stipple effect very subtle, so it almost looks like a soft, smooth shade. If I were to use, for example, a 5-round liner or a 7-round liner, the dots would be much more visible. With the lower voltage, I can go over the same areas more often than I could with a higher voltage. The shading is built up slowly, and the more passes I make, the darker it becomes. This is definitely a technique worth learning because the effect can be used in almost any tattoo, and it always looks good. This is exactly how I imagined it. With small dots, I can add very fine details. With this technique, you're also significantly faster than with traditional dot work. Here, my client is bleeding a bit more because we're working directly at the wrist. I can still get the ink into the skin properly, but if you find it difficult to work in areas like this, it's a good idea to pause for a moment, tattoo another area until the skin calms down, and then do a second pass. In this case, it's still working just fine. To make sure there's a light, even gray shade everywhere, I shade across the entire area. Now I can start refining the individual feathers. Stipple shading is not a continuous shade. It only looks that way. In reality, it consists of many small dots placed very close together. Here as well, I always inform my clients beforehand that this effect will lose some of its intensity over the years, especially with very soft stipple shading. And honestly, I think it's pretty cool when a tattoo changes over time but still looks good. In a few years, it will look more like a regular shading. I'd also like to thank all channel members, no matter which membership you have. Your support means a lot to me and motivates me to keep creating free videos for you. Thank you so much for everything. As mentioned before, I would need to use a thicker needle to make the effect more visible in the long term. I really love this technique. You can shade with extreme precision, and I even find the sound of it very calming. it's absolutely no problem to shade over lines, especially with such a skin-friendly shading technique. The shading is built up slowly until I'm satisfied. You can control the distance between the individual dots using your voltage. The slower the machine runs, the larger the distance between the dots. The faster the machine runs, the smaller the distance becomes. The machine shouldn't be held too flat, otherwise you'll create small strokes instead of many tiny dots. The darkness comes from the density of the dots, not from the depth. That's extremely important. Here you can see how light a shade can be, even though I'm working with pure black. Working with grayscale is also possible, but the shaded area would appear even softer. Now I continue refining the individual feathers. I always work from the same edge so that every feather gets the same effect. Skin type also plays a major role here. The effect is much more visible on lighter skin. There's no point in using this technique if you can barely see it in the end. By now, there are many tattoo artists who work exclusively with this technique, and I understand why. It simply looks extremely beautiful. If you've already watched several of my videos, you know that there are countless shading techniques. As a tattoo beginner, however, I would recommend focusing on one technique and learning it properly. It's not easy to learn everything at once, so take your time and go step by step. It's definitely helpful to have seen everything at least once, but the biggest progress comes from choosing one topic and practicing it intensively over a longer period of time. Tattooing requires a lot of patience. Sometimes you may also feel pressured by a client. For example, when they keep asking how long it will take. I've gotten into the habit of always giving a slightly longer time estimate from the start so the client doesn't become impatient. For example, if I think a design will take about 2 hours, I'll tell the client it will take around 3. That takes a lot of pressure off me, and it's always better to finish earlier than agreed rather than taking longer. Don't take inspiration from tattoo artists who criticize how slowly others work. If you and your client have agreed on the pace and both of you are happy, then there's absolutely no problem. Very often, the people who complain the most about how long something takes are the same ones who don't work cleanly. I've seen this many times. In my opinion, being a tattoo artist is only a beautiful profession as long as you enjoy it, and don't work like a robot just to finish one tattoo after another. Here, I'll briefly show you the normal camera view again, without double magnification, so you don't forget how delicate this work actually is. For this style, you definitely need a machine with a high stroke. The lower the stroke, the lighter the dots become, because the machine has less impact power. With a spring-loaded machine, this technique would be almost impossible to execute. I believe that many tattoo artists would have much stronger portfolios if they were willing to go the extra mile. Often, it's not a lack of skill, but a lack of patience and care. Especially at the beginning of your tattoo career, I recommend starting with very small designs. This gives you enough time to focus on executing the design cleanly and correctly without overwhelming yourself or getting used to working under stress. On the second wing, I would just be repeating myself, so I won't show it again here. If you're interested, you can find the real-time video for channel members on my channel. This is what the finished result looks like. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscription. And if you're interested in how I tattoo a realistic portrait on real skin, feel free to check out this video.